going on, guys? Welcome back. So the last video we discussed the southern campaign of the British and how it didn't really work. Specifically looking at the Carolinas in general, but when we left off, the British are struggling in the South, and it's not going well. And so today we're going to look at the end of the Revolution, and Britain really has themselves to blame because once they start focusing on the North and they try to focus on the South, everything seemed to go horribly wrong. And we're going to look at how exactly this happened, specifically the Battle of Yorktown. But before we get there, the British essentially go to Yorktown because they're angry and they're upset with what happened before. So the British are going to Yorktown, and it's important to note that Yorktown is in Virginia. Yorktown is a peninsula that is in Virginia, and a peninsula is when you're surrounded by water on three sides. So you can see to the north, Yorktown is surrounded by water. To the east, it's surrounded by water. To the south, it's surrounded by water. To the west is the land. But this three sides being surrounded by water, it makes up a peninsula. And this is important because Washington, let me draw a better circle. Washington, again, curly white wig. White was a fashion statement back then. Sees this. Washington sees this and believes he sees this and gets very, very excited. He believes that the colonies, again, with the help of the French, can trap the British in Yorktown. He believes that they can trap them in Yorktown. And so, I'm going to draw a bigger map. So you have Virginia right here, and then that goes down into North Carolina right there. Some poorly drawn maps, but either way, you have Virginia, and you got NC, right? Something similar to this. Right here in the middle, you have the British located at Yorktown. This is where the British are. British are located right there at Yorktown. All right? Well, this is where Washington's plan becomes important because what happens is the French set up boats all along the entrance to the south. This is a French blockade. Wrong aid. French blockade. Now, the French blockade is important because what you have is you have the British ships coming from New York. British ships are coming from New York with supplies and troops to help Great Britain here at Yorktown. And so they're sailing. They see the French, and they're forced to turn and go back because they were not prepared to battle at this French blockade. So that is very important. The British, because of this blockade, because of the blockade, no supplies, no extra troops. And this is step one of Washington's plan to trap them at Yorktown. So the blockade is a success. The blockade is a success. They're unable to come in. Well, now we look over here on land, and what you have are colonial troops plus some French troops, and they start to invade on land from the west. They invade on land from the west. You have from the south, you have French troops, which obviously are allowed to get through the blockade. Coming from the south, and then from the north, you have Washington. Plus the French, once again, coming in from the north to attack them there. This forces Britain to split its army three ways. It's not good to split your army once. Or twice, I'm sorry. It's not even good to have to fight in two different places. But to have to fight in three different places is really not good. So they have to split their army into three. The leaders of Great Britain fighting at Yorktown quickly realize this is not going to end well. And so once the fighting begins, they try to put up a fight. They're unable to do so successfully, and so they surrender. And this surrender is important because these are 8,000 troops in the process. There are 8,000 troops that also surrender with the British. And this, again, is the Battle of Yorktown. The Battle of Yorktown and the success of Washington, or the failures of the British, one or the other, is kind of the turning point that leads to the British surrendering the war as a whole. The loss of 8,000 troops this far into the war, which would have then allowed the colonies to take over everywhere else in the South. All of this goes back to England, where King George is forced he is forced to say, it's over. He's forced to just realize that it is over. There's no coming back from this. And the Battle of Yorktown is the end of the American Revolution. There are some more smaller, minor battles that take place, mainly because the way communication worked back then, troops didn't necessarily know the war was over. So we looked at the British decision to go to Yorktown sets up Washington's idea to trap them. The trap is set in stone. Step one being the blockade. Step two being the ability to attack them from three different sides. Had the British never gone to Yorktown to recover from the losses in the South? Does this happen? Nobody knows. It's revisionist history. If they just give up their hopes to take over the South, are they able to return up north, regroup, recuperate, and then try to attack the South again? We also don't know. But the decision to try and gather at Yorktown, where they would have been able to get more supplies and more people, is stopped by the French blockade, and then the fighting itself forces them to surrender. And this is the end of the American Revolution. Now, when we return, we're going to stop right here for today, but when we come back, we're going to look at the effects of this war, the immediate effects of the revolution. What happens now? What happens next? And it's a fear of the unknown amongst the colonies. It's not exactly all jubilation and happiness going on. Now it's time to figure out what are we going to do. But this is where we're going to stop for today. Check Canvas for today's assignments. Let me know if you have any questions. And as always, have a great day.